ladies and gentlemen, with the addition of a new generalist support like Chisa to the Wuthering Waves roster, I think that there are a lot of questions floating around when it comes to what she's actually going to be able to provide for your teams. And there are already some comparisons getting made, probably with help from myself, that she might actually be a unit that's as general and as much of a staple as Shorekeeper. And when we think about Shorekeeper and when we think about what she can provide for teams, it's a lot. That's why she's actually considered one of the biggest must-pulls in the game, one of the highest value units that can be used across a variety of teams. And the question that I wanted to answer for all of you today was, is Chisa the new Shorekeeper? And so what I've done is I've actually prepared a whole goddamn PowerPoint presentation, a little bit with some calculations, but we're keeping it very simple, just so that, you know, we don't go overboard with like math or spreadsheets, anything like that, to explain what exactly she's going to do. So without further ado, let's just go ahead. Let's get right on into it. And I'll also make sure to bring up supporting materials from both her profile and, of course, stats in-game to be able to bolster some of the points that are being made over here. So without further ado, let's get right on into it. Is Chisa the new Shorekeeper? All right, so for some context, if we're asking the question, is she the new Shorekeeper, we should probably actually know what value does Shorekeeper even provide to teams. And so make sure to feel free to correct me on this, but I'm pretty sure I'm correct about everything over here. Shorekeeper has damage boost. First couple ones being boost to crit rate. Yes, she boosts 12.5% crit rate and then 25% critical damage. And then she also has 15% all damage amplification on her outro skill that stacks with other outro skills. That's a lot of damage boosts. She also has sustain. She's got healing on her resonance skill and liberation, right? She's also got grouping as well on her basic attack 3 and then her forte heavy attack. And of course, damage. A little bit. She's got like burst from her enhanced intro. It does like 30k a rotation. Not really that much on the damage side, but it is what it is. And the reasons for why I'm listing out all of these different components is that these are like the cornerstones of her kit. These are like the highlights and what everyone uses her for. And the thing is that Chisa actually does all of these things. Chisa has damage boosts through her defense reduction. She's got sustain with healing on a bunch of abilities. She's got grouping as well built into her kit. And of course, she actually does do a decent chunk of damage. And, well, if you're skeptical about that last point, I'll just direct you over to this part of her profile over here, looking at her resonance liberation real fast, just so you can see what I'm talking about over here. The bonus damage multiplier for Saw Ring Eradication, blah, 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 it's all increased by 120% after you use her liberation. Yeah. So, Shorekeeper doesn't really have any taglines like that built into her kit. Believe me when I tell you this, Chisa, while not doing as much damage as other characters, probably because of how multi-rolled she is and all the stuff that she brings to the table, she's probably going to do a lot more damage than Shorekeeper. Because Shorekeeper, again, does like 30, 40, 50k a rotation at max build. It's not really a lot. So, going back to this, that's why we're running some of the comparisons over here. Because they're both general supports. They're both supposed to work on a wide variety of attribute-based teams. Let's see how the comparisons are looking like damage-wise first. So, here are some of the reasons for why Chisa might be the new Shorekeeper. And we're going to be talking about some of the buffs that she can actually provide to your teams. The first one is, Chisa applies Havoc Bane. That is a 2% defense reduction per stack of Havoc Bane. She applies it automatically with her kit. You don't really have to do that much work to trigger it and build up all the stacks on enemies once you do things like use her skill or kill somebody on field with a teammate of hers. That'll actually like cause the Havoc Bane to spread to other targets. So that's 12% defense reduction at a max of 6 stacks. Second, Chisa also grants an 18% defense ignore to anybody on the team that inflicts negative statuses or deals negative status damage. So that's a 12% defense reduction from Havoc Bane, 6 stacks of it, on top of 18% defense ignore. That's a lot. So now let's look at how that actually results in damage differences across the two. And these are some of the baseline calculations. Remember, this is just like napkin math that I did while my internet was out this morning. So there might be some minor calculation errors. I might have messed up a formula or two, but you should hopefully directionally understand what's going on over here. So damage in this game, the formula for it is essentially base damage, which is a result of your attack and motion values and all that other shit, times the resistances, times your bonuses. That's what it is. And resistances are typically above or below 1, so they make your damage lower, and then bonuses are typically above 1, so they make your damage higher. And so for the sake of this, to keep it simple, we're going to assume 10,000 base damage. Chisa focuses on reducing resistances, while Shorekeeper focuses on increasing bonuses. So let's keep reading. So your resistance is just equal to your resistance multiplier times your defense multiplier times your reduction. The resistance multiplier at default is usually 0.9. Your defense multiplier, and let me just make sure that you guys can actually see this, your defense multiplier is 0.488. Assuming it's a level 90 character, a level 100 enemy, like you would see in the TOA, and no elemental resistance or damage reduction doing any weird fucky stuff behind the scenes. That's what it is. And so, your 10,000 damage becomes about 4.4k. That's how much multiplying 10,000 times 0.9 and then by 0.488, that's the end result that you're going to get. A pretty big reduction in your damage. Next, when you're getting into bonuses, you basically just take your percent damage bonus, you multiply that by your amplify, and then you multiply that by your crit. And so an example over here is assume the damage percent bonus is 150%. 50% bonus over 100. Then your amplify bonus is only going to be 100%. So that means a 0% amplification bonus. And then your crit boost is going to be 212.5%. Or with a baseline set of stats of 250% crit damage and 75% crit rate. Some people might be wondering, oh, Saint, why is that the number? Why is it 212.5? And the reason for that is kind of simple, right? Crits essentially need critical chance to actually occur. And so what I basically did was, there's an amount of damage that's a baseline in the game. Everybody at a baseline has 100% critical damage, or 150% critical damage. And so you actually need to subtract 100 from 250, get 150, then divide it by 75%, and then you end up with like 112.5%. And then you just add the baseline damage of an attack back into it. So it's 1.125 or 112.5% plus 100. Crit boost here would show equal damage. Yeah, so basically think about it this way. If you had 250% crit damage and 100% crit rate, then you would be dealing 250% over here. Because you would be dealing 250% crit damage with every attack. The baseline damage is 100, so you're really dealing 150% bonus damage every attack. Is it becoming a bit more clear? This is how we're going to factor in the efficacy of Shorekeeper's buffs. So, essentially, when you factor in all those numbers, the end result is that your 4,300 damage, or 4.4k, whatever it was, it ends up becoming 14,000. I think I messed up with the number over here somewhere. I think I might have mistyped that. It is what it is. It doesn't really matter. It's off by like a couple tens or something like that. That's what the default damage is looking like over here. 1,400. So let's go ahead and see what the damage differences are factoring in Chisa. She has a 12% defense reduction and an 18% defense ignore. That means that your defense multiplier is going to go from 0.488 to 0.5693. And so your actual damage after defense reductions goes from 4.4k to 5.1. Not really like that much of an improvement overall. It's not a massive amount, but that's what it's looking like. Then you add in your bonuses as well, and you end up with like a total damage number of about like 16.332%, or 16.332k, something like that. Now, when we look at Shorekeeper, this is the difference. She gives a 50% damage amp, 87.5% crit rate, and 275% crit damage, because we take that baseline one, right? And then we add in her bonuses. That's what it looks like over here. And then your crit multiplier is then going to be buffed to 253.125 over the lower one that we had before. That was like 212. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at that damage bonus. We're still using that same 4.4k number, but it went up to 19k. So, let's just take a look at this, right? Chisa's at 16.3k, and then Shorekeeper's at 19. And so the conclusion that everyone's going to go with is, Damn, Chisa looks like a piece of shit. Damn, she doesn't look that strong. Damn, she looks like she's worse than Shorekeeper. But this is the reality over here. And this is something that, and this might be a bit of a hard pill to swallow for some individuals. This isn't a vacuum. It's not quite like that. And I'll explain to you exactly why. So, for damage calculation bonuses, it's very easy to oversaturate on them. All damage bonuses are added together. And so, to describe that for you, let me talk about it this way. Using this character as an example, right? I've got over here 30% arrow damage bonus, 30% arrow damage bonus, and then a bunch of these heavy attacks, right? All of them are added up together, and then they all go into one part of the calculation. And so, I have a very big risk if I only build damage bonus stats. I have a very big risk of oversaturating only one part of the equation. And remember what the equation is, ladies and gentlemen. It has three factors to it. For damage bonus and amplify, everything gets added up and goes into it. Crit is one of the only ones where just having more crit is one of the biggest boosts you can have overall to your damage. That's why people prioritize it so much. It's really, really good. And you're probably seeing why. And so you end up with diminishing returns over time if you add up too much of one type of bonus. Let me show you an example of one team where Shorekeeper's amplification does close to nothing. We all know at a baseline, Shorekeeper gives 15% damage amp. For a lot of teams, this is actually a lot. This is a big damage bonus. It helps out a lot for the final ending damage. But the unfortunate part about Shorekeeper's buff is that there are some characters that already have a fuck ton of damage amplification already in their kit. For example, let me just show you a heavy attack, Starflash. This is Phoebe's base damage on her heavy attack, her Forte enhanced one. As you can see, that's like 240% at level 10. That's fucking terrible. It deals no damage at all. But when Phoebe's in Absolution state, this skill gains 256% damage amp. Are you guys seeing what's going on over here? The base damage of the ability is dog shit, and this ability mostly gets boosted by her own personal damage amplification of 256%. And when you put Shorekeeper on the team, her Shorekeeper's 15% damage amp isn't working off of this. It's working off of this. She's amplifying this dog shit 240% motion value attack. She's giving 15% to it. That's not really that good, is it? That's not really that strong. Compared to, well, what if we gave Phoebe some attack? Wouldn't that make the end result of the motion value calculation a lot stronger? Because, well, the base damage is just your attack times your motion value. And so attack actually ends up looking a little bit more appealing as an investment for a Phoebe than, say, damage amp. Because you're already giga oversaturated in damage amp over here. And so more isn't going to help you. However, where Shorekeeper shines with this team is the fact that she provides crit. Because like I said before, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll just pull this up on the screen real fast so you all can see. Crit is separate from amplify. Crit is separate from the amplification that's giga oversaturated over here. It is separate in the damage calculation. So that's why Shorekeeper actually ends up being a pretty decent teammate for Phoebe. Not because of the amp, but only because of the crit. And so when you have Zani as well, she's got a similar situation. Where Zani gets 50% Spectral Frazzle damage amp built into her weapon, 30% from Phoebe, who adds even more amp, so now you're at 80% Spectral Frazzle amp, and then you have Zani come in after Phoebe outro skills, and that gives 100% amp. So Zani effectively has 180% Spectral Frazzle damage amplification, and all of her attacks in Blaze form deal Spectral Frazzle damage. And I swear to God, she even has like another one. Yeah, she even got the Enhanced Resonance skill. Yeah, I think that one also gives her even more amp. Wait, let me see over here. Yeah, there we go. 20%. So she actually got like 200% Spectral Frazzle damage amp. And all of her damage is Spectral Frazzle damage. So Shorekeeper is taking Zani from 200 to 250%. And remember, guys, the motion value on Zani's attacks aren't necessarily large. However, they become a lot larger because of the 200% amp that she has built into her kit with the help of Phoebe. And so Shorekeeper's 15%, it's working off of these numbers, not the end result of all of the different sources of amplification that she has available. So the end result, guys, is that there's a lot of very oversaturated teams that don't actually need a lot of the stats that are being provided by Shorekeeper. And that's why defense reduction is so much more important for those lineups. That's why defense reduction can actually play a bigger role in those teams. Because once again, guys, when we're looking at what the damage formula actually is in this game, take a look at this. It's your base damage times your resistances and times your bonuses. Think of your Zani and Phoebes as characters that have a fuck ton of built-in bonuses, but none of the built-in resistance reduction. And so the lower they can reduce their resistance, the more bonuses you'll actually get from dealing the damage. So it's another way to make those other bonuses feel stronger, because you're reducing how much your damage gets reduced by this resistance piece. Is that a bit more clear now? Are the differences between these two characters becoming a bit more apparent? They're hitting different sides of the damage formula, but the fact that Chisa is one of the only like 2 or 3 characters in the game that reduces defense on their own, that's what makes her super unique. Because she has a very rare stat that is very hard to access on the roster. I do believe that defense ignore and defense reduction is only available on either 5-star weapons or like 2 or 3 kits in the game. Zani's weapon is an example of one that reduces defense. Similarly, Yuno and Augusta's weapons, right? They're also ones that ignore defense. And Carlotta's kit, I think, is one of the only ones that like has defense ignore. Yeah, Carlotta has deconstruction in her kit, and that allows her to ignore 18% defense. So that's like, there's like 2 characters in the game that have this mechanic. Like 2 or 3 of them. And so, to kind of wrap this all up, guys, Chisa gives this access to defense ignore and reduction to every single team. Defense ignore, or defense reduction to every team, defense ignore only to the negative status teams. That's the answer to the question over here. Is Shorekeeper stronger? Somebody keep in mind. Chisa also has quite a few more bonuses as well. She'll deal more damage than Shorekeeper. That's probably something that's going to happen. We all know that Shorekeeper deals absolutely nothing outside of her enhanced intro skill, and that doesn't even do that much even at full build. It's like 45k in a rotation. If Chisa doesn't deal more than 45k damage in a rotation, we are fucking cooked, because that is no damage at all. Her outro skill is also going to increase the stack limit on negative statuses by 3. And this is a realization I think a lot of people haven't made yet. Negative statuses actually deal damage. And I'll show you just how much damage they can actually deal. Let's just see an example of how much a fully stacked up arrow erosion tick does. And for this change over here, we're just going to put in, I think on this floor, let's just get Arrow Rover, get their outro skill and everything set up, and then put in a Cartithia, because I don't want to buff the arrow of the team too much. And let me just make sure. Oh, dearie me, they got some shit on them over here. Oh, that ain't good. Oh man, this is a pain in the I'm just gonna put rejuvenating glow on them. It doesn't matter if they have like Gust of Welkin or anything. Yeah, that's a bit rough. Okay, we'll do that, and we'll just see how much a tick of this actually does. It's gonna be a 6-stack arrow erosion tick. Here we go. We should be able to get it here. All right, we're at 6 stacks. 10k. 10k again. Remember how I said Shorekeeper's Liberation deals like 40k damage a rotation? This is dealing 10k every 2 seconds at max stacks. Like 10k every 2 seconds. And as you can see, at 3 stacks, it dealt 4.2k. So the higher the amount of stacks go for some of these debuffs, the more damage they actually start dealing. And that's the thing. These debuffs actually deal a meaningful amount of damage. And there's another piece that I didn't show because I intentionally didn't want to show it. Negative status teams amplify their debuff damage all the time. All I need to do is show you the outro skills of Chacona and Phoebe. That's it. That's all you need to see. Arrow damage. Arrow erosion damage dealt to targets near the active resonator is amplified by 100%. So those 10k ticks that I just showed you guys, those 10k ticks, they now become 20-something. If you have Chakota on the team and she used this outro skill buff. And then for Phoebe, well, guess what? She's got 100% spectral frazzle damage amplification as well. Well, if you decide to use her confession mode. So maybe confession mode Phoebe will have a bigger use case in the future beside being Zani slave. Because that's what confession mode Phoebe currently is. She is literally the Zani side bumper car on her motorcycle. That is her role. And so now there's potential for her to be an actual damage over time damage dealer in the future. That's something that she's now capable of. And that's pretty cool. Chisa's also going to enable every other archetype of negative statuses moving forward as well, too. That's another thing that she's capable of. And so if you just go ahead, we go to the Wuthering Waves news menu. We actually got the full breakdown of what every single new negative status is going to look like. And I'm going to be honest, guys. Some of these ones look insane. For example, is Chisa actually going to nerf Fusion Burst? Because when Fusion Burst is stacked to max, all stacks will be removed to trigger an explosion. She raises the stack limit by 3. And so does Chisa result in you taking longer to trigger your explosion, but then when you do trigger the explosion, it's way bigger and deals more damage? Oh wait, that's literally exactly what's going to happen. So she's going to buff every single Fusion Burst team to have their negative status deal more damage. And when it comes to Glacial Chafe stacks up to 10 times by default. The higher the stacks, the more damage dealt. It's also a damage over time effect. And when Glacial Chafe reaches max stacks, the target's frozen and all stacks will be removed. However, when Chisa's on the team, she raises the stack limit higher and allows you to deal more damage before the boss gets frozen. Because then you unlock stacks 11 and 12 to further stack up and deal more of that damage. So that's another mechanic that she has intentionally built into her kit, and that's even more debuff support, more negative status support. And then, moving forward, right, we then got Electro Flare going on. And when it comes to Electro Flare, guys, this has two components of a debuff, where it has 10 stacks on Electro Flare, and the higher the stacks, the more damage dealt. And when you're at maximum stacks of Electro Flare, new stacks become Electro Rage. And guess what? Electro Rage makes Electro Flare do more damage. So that means that you now have 13 stack limits on both of those. Your maximum number of Electro Flare stacks went from 20 to 26. Because guess what, guys? Chisa also buffs this Electro Rage component too, and increases the stack limit of that one by 3. So that's a big piece that we aren't factoring in here. And you want to know what the other part and the craziest part about all of this that I don't think a lot of people have realized yet? When it comes to the damage formula for negative statuses, it's not this. The damage formula for negative statuses is not base damage times resistance times bonuses. The damage formula for negative statuses is just a base amount of damage plus amp or times amp divided by resistance. And so the only way to actually buff arrow damage or arrow erosion damage, hypothetically, is to A, have Chakona on the team to give the amp, reduce the arrow resistance of the enemy, which Chakona can actually do with her pistol, her signature, or it's reduced defense. And that's where Chisa comes in. And I might as well write that out, right? Or, fuck it. I'll write it out because it's actually an important one. Negative status damage. Damage equals base damage times status amp times resistances. And there's not a lot of ways to increase it. Your damage bonus, for example, does nothing for your negative status damage. The only ways to increase it are status amps, or yeah, basically status amps that you get from outro skills, or reducing the enemy's defense. Some might say that's a limitation in the game, but it does give Chisa a very tailored strength. She's for negative status teams. She greatly buffs their damage. She works with every single existing negative status team. She's going to be really good with Phoebe and Zani, right? For the reasons that I mentioned. And she's also going to be very good for Chacona and Cartithia as well. She's also going to give Arrow Rover the capability to convert Havoc Bane stacks to Arrow Erosion stacks too, so there might be a team that comes out of that one. Fact of the matter is that there's a lot more components going into Chisa's value than just this damage calculation difference that you're seeing over here. Because on paper, Shorekeeper is going to buff raw damage a lot more, but Chisa's going to do a lot of other stuff on the side to make up for it. And Chisa should be super usable, super strong, and also buff the damage of every negative status team that is coming out. And so from that point of view, yes, this is the new Shorekeeper. Chisa is the new Shorekeeper, but she only works for negative status teams, and she only fills that role for negative status teams. And this is another thing that I'm going to say. Your negative status teams will really miss not having Chisa as well in the future, but she should rerun quite frequently, much like how Shorekeeper reruns very, very frequently. I think that Chisa is going to closely follow or be closely followed by negative status characters on her reruns, because she looks like she's going to be very, very, very essential to having them scale as time goes on. And like I said before, she has very, very strong interactions with increasing the cap limits on all of these debuffs, because they all deal much more damage the higher number of stacks they are. And so increasing the stack limit is, and quite probably will be, one of the best ways to increase these types of teams' damage. Now, this has been a bit of a Chisa glaze or Chisa defense. What about her downsides? Right? What is wrong with this unit? What's fucked up about her? Why is she low value? And this is the thing, right? We'll cover these in a later video, because I already do have a lot of words when it comes to the value of the unit, whether or not you should pull her, all of these different things. That'll be saved for a later video, because this one's already like 30 minutes, and we covered a lot of nerdy shit in this one. But, yeah. That's what we're going to be looking like over here, ladies and gentlemen. This is the sort of like our breakdown of Chisa's value. Again, this was like rough calculation, shit that I was doing while my internet was off, but hopefully it's painted a much clearer picture for whether or not you actually do want to pull this unit and the value that she's going to have moving forward. Because, again, she's way more general than you might be thinking. Havoc Bane and its defense reduction and her own defense reduction applies to every single negative status team. And from the design of this debuff as a whole, it's meant to work with other debuffs. You can almost think of Havoc Bane as very similar to, like, God, I would say like Animo in Genshin Impact. You combine Havoc Bane with any of these other negative statuses, and the other negative status will deal more damage. Kind of like how you combine Animo with any other element in Genshin, and then that element it got combined with deals more damage. There's a similar sort of dynamic going on over here. It's not as complicated or as nuanced as the elemental system, but you kind of just pair up Havoc Bane with anything and it'll make it deal more damage. So, yeah. That'll be that for this one, ladies and gentlemen. That'll be our breakdown. But don't worry, we'll be following up tomorrow or the day after tomorrow with some of my bigger concerns on Chisa as a character. Because, well, it's a very similar thing for a lot of new units to be in the circumstance that she is in. So it might be better to save for a rerun rather than pull her on release. But we'll break into that a bit later on. So yeah, that'll be it for this one. Let me know what you all thought. Peace out.